Hi, Diane here. Hey, I make a lot of enamel components and sometimes I get questions about how to use them. Now I make a bunch of different kinds. Some have just one hole and it's pretty easy to see how to use those. You just, use a jump ring to attach and just add whatever little wire dangle you want to with that. Some of them have two holes like these, so they're pretty easy to use. You just use the top hole to attach your ear wire and the bottom to add a little dangle. But some of them, like this one, have three holes and people are confused about what do you do with that third hole? What can you do with that? So I have some samples of earrings that I've made with the three holes. So basically the top hole is adding the ear wire, the bottom hole for some dangles. But the middle hole is for just adding some cool little metal components. Now, sometimes I add the little gears that you saw here with a washer in the middle. Sometimes I add the cool sprocket gears on there, and that's what I'm going to go over today. So you can fancy these up by adding cool ear wires, or these are just a simple ear wire, and I'm going to show that in the video today. So, here's what we're working on today. This is a three-hole component and we're going to build a set of earrings out of these. So, that's what we're going to do today. I'll be back in a minute. We're going to go over what tools you're going to need to make this pair of earrings. So first we have the round nose pliers. Then we have the flat nose pliers. You're going to need some flush cutters. You will need a planishing hammer. I'm going to use a bunch of planishing hammers today, but you really only need one. You will need a bench block. And there's my bench block down here. You're also going to need a doming tool and some dapping tools. Okay, so let's get started. This is the component I'm going to use today. You can see it's a three-hole component. And the first thing I'm going to do is, what do you do with that middle hole? Okay. So what I have here is a couple of flat washers. One is the sprocket gear, and the other is just a flat copper washer. Now these come, if you look at the bead shows, the copper washers, they come in a string like this. And you see how they're wavy? Well, they're bendable. So what I do first, I flatten them out with a pair of flat nose pliers. So here you can see I have a wavy one. Let's see if I can put that up against the, there you go. You can see how it bends. All I do to flatten that out is push it down into the flat nose plier and give it a squeeze. Now it's flat. But I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to dap it a little bit. So I've got my dapping tool. All right, I'm going to bring you down to the workbench. Okay, so I'm going to put my little washer inside the dapping block, and then I need a dapping tool and a brass mallet, and I'm just pounding that down. Now I'm going to work into smaller holes here because I want a nice bend on that. And as I work my way down to smaller settings, I have to use smaller dapping tools. So I want a real nice tight bend on that, so I'm working down to a much smaller section of the dapping block. So here we go. Let's see if I can get that in there. Actually, I think I might have to do one before I get to that smallest one. So I'm just hitting into that brass dapping block, and I'm moving over to this smaller section. I might need a smaller dapping tool. So I'm hitting this with a brass mallet. Now I worked for years with just a regular hammer from the garage. You can use one, but they recommend a brass block or brass hammer to do this. So what I've got here is a nicely domed washer. Let's see if I can get that up to the camera so you can see it. It's got a nice dome on it now. The next thing I want to dome is this sprocket gear. It's very flat. So I'm going to start in the biggest. Now I'm going to start in the one that's already pretty beat up. This is the one I start in. It's a little smaller than an inch. So I put the gears in there, and then I'm going to come in with this tool and the brass mallet. Oops. Can you still see? Okay, I'm going to have to fix my camera. Okay, so yes, you can see my bench block. Okay, so I'm going to dome this, start with the biggest one and work my way down. Except the one I would normally use is holding my camera back. And I don't move to any other doming section of the block here. I like the curve that is put on it. Let's see if I can get that on there. So that's what it looks like. And now you can see how well the little domed copper washer looks inside there. Okay, so now I'm ready to rivet that onto my enamel piece. So there we go. What I use to do the riveting on the enamel, this is the trick with glass, you don't want to put any pressure on that glass while you're doing your riveting, because, you know, it'll break. It's pretty hardy, but if you're going to pound on it with a hammer, you're going to do some damage. So what I use is a little tiny screw, and I sell these on my website, as well as the gears and the components and everything. But really what this is just the little screws that they fix glasses with. Some of the kits come with screws and bolts, or nuts, I guess. You're going to want those nuts, because that's how you rivet it without doing damage to the piece. So I put the little screw inside the washer and inside the geared component, and now I'm going to push it through the enameled component, and you can see how far that sticks out of the glass. Now here's the trick for doing this, because these things are really hard to work with. Oops, I'll be back in a minute. Hold on. Okay, I'm back. I want to show you the trick to working with these little teeny tiny screws, because I tried forever to get them to work, just holding them in my hands, and it was impossible. So what this is wax. If you have any kids that have orthodontics, take their wax. You only need a little bitty bit. So I just squeeze off just a little bit, roll it up on my fingers, and then you can put it on just about anything. I put it on the end of a crochet hook. You just stick the wax on the end there. That's going to allow you to pick up this little teeny tiny nut. I guess it's a nut. Okay, back to the workbench. Okay, so there's a little teeny tiny nut on the workbench. I'm going to come in right at a right angle to it, so I get it nice and flat on that piece of wax. I'll let you see there. Now, I don't have to use my fingers and my thumbs to hold on to that. It's just stuck on the end of that crochet hook. You can use anything you want to hold that wax, but I like working with the crochet hook. Okay, so I have the enamel components. They're all sandwiched together with the screw coming through there. And I'm just going to come in with that crochet hook with the nut on the end and spin. And I got it going on there first try. Okay, you don't have to do it very tight, but what I did here, I got it going with that wax bit, and now I'm going to grab the back of that nut with my flat nose pliers. Don't know if you can see this very well in the camera, but I just grab that, and it's all together now. It's all started on the threads, but I flip it over and then use the little screwdriver kit. It's actually a Phillips head that comes with the glass repair kits, or you can buy them separately. But you just tighten that down. You don't want to tighten it very tight, just till it's, almost snug. I like to keep these loose because I get a kick out of spinning them. I like kinetic things. So it's very loose, and that's important because if you tighten it real tight, you're going to damage the glass. Okay, So now what you have on the underside, you have that screw, and I don't know if you can see on camera how much it's sticking up, but you want to cut that off. You want to leave just a little bit sticking out. And what I usually do is poke a hole through a business card, but I don't see one on my workbench. Oh wait, maybe this one has it. Yeah. I take a 1.25 punch and I just punch through a business card. Actually, maybe it's a 1.5. Now I have a little hole in my business card that screw will fit through. Okay. Now can you see the edge sticking up here? I can feel it with my finger. Now you're going to take the flush cutters, and I like to use a pair of flush cutters that aren't my absolute favorite because I don't want to damage them. But you press it just flush with that business card and clip it off. Make sure you cover the V-nose there so that you don't shoot that across the room. You want to protect your eyes. Okay, so what that has done has given you just a tiny bit of metal sticking out up above that nut. And what you want to do is hit that with either a riveting hammer or a real narrow planishing hammer. You just want to spread that metal out just a tiny bit. You want to flatten it out so it's not scratchy, and you want to spread that metal so that if you're like me and you spin this thing all the time, it's not going to come off. So I have a little Wubbers hammer that has a rounded edge. I'm not sure what they call this. It might be a texturing hammer, but I like this a lot because it has a really small end on it. Now I'm coming back to the workbench. Oops. Okay, here's another trick for you. Because this is domed, you can't get that screw to lay on your workbench. And you want to have that screw take all the punishment from the riveting. You don't want to hammer and have the glass taking the force of that. So what I use is the end of the dapping tool, and I make sure that the screw is sitting on the edge of that. I don't know if you can see that, but it's right up in there. Now the screw is on that dapping tool, and I put that on my bench block like this. Now if you have a vise on your bench block, on your workbench, you can tighten it up in a vise, but I find it's pretty easy to hold in my hands like this. Basically I'm pinching the enamel piece and the dapping tool at the same time, so it's going to stay there. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to gently tap that screw, being very careful not to hit the glass. I feel that, and already it's pretty smooth. Okay, now I have a Wubbers planishing hammer. It's a fairly small surface too, so this is the one I like to use just to flatten it out even more. But you know, if you're just using a regular planishing hammer, that's going to be fine. But you want to be very gentle. You want to make sure that you're coming in on a solid plane here, so you're not hitting the glass. You're coming in at a 90-degree angle so that you're not going to hit that glass as you're tapping on there. And it's just a gentle tap. I'm not giving it any good wax or anything. So that's pretty rounded off. What I want to do now to test this is I'm going to come back in with my flat nose pliers, grab that, flip it over, and now I want to find that little screwdriver. I don't know, does your workbench look like this? Mine is a mess, and I can't find that screwdriver. Okay, there it is. So I'm going to try and unscrew this, because if I've done a good job of riveting, it won't come undone. And it's in there good, because when you rivet that, it's spreading that metal out, and that's going to keep the nut from coming off when you spin this. This is actually pretty loose. I might come in and tighten that down just a little bit more, but it's fine the way it is. It's not going to come off of there. Okay, so our next decision is, which way's upright? Do we want it to dangle like this, in which case we'll put a bead down here and the ear wire up here? Or do you like it like this? I don't know. I think I like it this way. Okay, so now I'm going to add a little dangle on the end of that. And I have a head pin here, and I have a little bead that's kind of crackly and green. I think that'll go well with the component. And then I'm going to add a little bit of copper. I like to bring back in the metals that I've used. So I've got the silver head pin, little ball, and I've got the copper here. It just is going to tie it together with that silver and copper that's on the piece. So to do the head pin, I grab it with my round nose plier, and I'm just going to do a 90-degree bend. And then I'm going to reposition this, and I'm going about midway up the round nose pliers because I want a fairly decent size circle on the tip of this to go through the component. You don't want your connector to rub on the glass at all. So I bend that around, and now you can see I have basically a circle there, and it's very uneven. I'm rolling that on the plier a little more so that it sits upright. A nice circle kind of sits on top of the wire. The bend should be at a 90-degree angle. I don't know if you can see that, but okay, so now I'm going to spread that out a little bit, and that's twisted to leave a little opening for that component to go through. Now I'm going to slide it onto this opening of the component, and now I want to make sure, let's see, I'm going to grab this with my round nose plier and get that back so that the circle is closed, and I want to make sure that it dangles nicely, that it's not catching on the component anywhere, the component can move. Okay, and that's pretty good. So now I grab this right here with the round nose plier, and I'm just gently hanging on to that circle so that I can wrap the end around. Oops, and it's better to leave the tail on a side you can work with. So there we go. I'm holding on to it with the round nose plier. I grab that tail, just work it around, once or twice, whatever it takes. Okay, now I'm going to come in with the flush nose plier and cut that off very close to the pin. I don't know if you can see that. There we go. So now we've got the dangly piece going on there. And now we need to make the ear wire and connect that probably with a jump ring. So let's see. What I like to use is 20 gauge wire, and this is the kind I get. It's Beadsmith 20 gauge silver wire with copper core. Okay, and I just buy that online. I like to work off the roll because I don't like to waste wire. Okay, so when you do this, you want to put your beads on here, and whatever bead you want to be at the top of the earring wire, you put on first. So I want this little copper piece to be the first bead. And then I have these little, they're kind of green colored cube beads. Okay, so that's what I want to be on my ear wire. So I'm going to take the round nose pliers, and I'm going to come back about, I don't know, looks like 1.5 inches or so. And I'm coming up about, I don't know, a little more than 1/4 inch on the plier. I don't want a real big circle on that, just a little one's fine, because I'm going to use a jump ring to connect this to the component. So I'm just rolling back until I have a circle around the round nose plier. Okay, now I'm taking the plier out and I'm putting it back in so that I can make a 90-degree bend on there. Okay, so that is what it looks like so far. Hope the camera can focus on that. Now I grab that across with my round nose. Now, you might want to use your flat nose pliers because, if you're just beginning, these round nose pliers, they'll leave a mark on your wire. So it's probably better to grab it with the flat nose plier. That way you won't be marring it up, putting little dents in it as you go. Now, I'm not putting my component on here because I'm going to attach it with a jump ring. But if you want to connect directly to the component, you can do that now. I would make a bigger round piece there at the end of my ear wire. But that's up to you. I like to connect with jump rings, so I'm not worried about that now. So I've grabbed that circle, and I come around once, and then I'm going to slide down the first bead on the ear wire, and I wrap that end around it, and then go around the ear wire once. Then I bring the second bead down. Whoops, yeah, there we go. I've gone around the center pin once, and I'm going to fold that wire around that second bead, and then go around the ear wire, I don't know, once or twice, whatever you have wire left for. So I've gone around twice. Now, ooh, can I get that in the camera? Yeah. Okay, so I have that little end there. I'm going in with the flush cutters and clipping that off, and I'm going to cover that with my finger because I don't want that flying off into my eye. Okay, when you look at the flat nose ply or the flush cutters, it's got two sides. This is the flat side, and it's got a V side. So when you clip that, wherever that V is pointing, whatever side has the V, that's the way the end of the wire is going to go flying if you don't cover it. So that's aimed right at my face, so I'm careful to cover that up. I'm usually wearing glasses, but you know, I have stuck pieces of wire into the wall before, so I'm always very careful to cover that. I don't want to hurt anybody. Okay, so here's what we have. It's a rounded piece on the edge of the wire, and you can see it's fairly crooked. So I'm going to use the flat nose pliers to straighten that out. I want that loop on the end there to be parallel with the wire, and the circle part to be sitting on top of the wire. I don't want it to be lopsided one side or the other, so I fixed that so it's sitting on top and it's rounded. Okay, now I'm going to come in here and gently grab those two little loops at the end with my flat nose plier. I'm not pinching the bead, I'm just pinching where the coils are, and I'm going to make a 90-degree bend. Okay, now I have these graduated pliers here, and I like to use them to make the ear wires, but really you can use anything. If you have a Bic pen or anything that's round that's about the shape you like for your ear wires, you can use it. So I'm going to show you with these. I put that in between the two sides, and then I just pinch a little bit and wrap that wire around that tool. I'm really rolling the tool back on the wire. And then I'm grabbing this end that has a loop on it, and I'm bringing it forward because I want the end of the ear wire not to run parallel, but fairly close to parallel with this end here. Now, with the flush nose pliers, or the flush cutters, the flat end is going to give you a flat end on your wire, and if you have it this way, it's going to pinch the wire, so you'll wind up with a pinched edge. For the end of my ear wire, I want to make sure that I've got the flat edge up, because I want that ear wire to be nice and flat. I don't want it all pinched up so it's going to, you know, hurt my ear as it goes through. So, I don't know if you can see that, but I'm just clipping that off. I also have this tool. This is a burr cup. Gosh, I hope that's in focus, but it's really hard to tell. But I use these to just smooth out the end of that wire. Even though we did a flat cut, the burr cup will kind of round it off and take any sharp edges off of there. So I feel that feels pretty good. Now I need a jump ring, and I did not put one, well, I didn't put one on my workbench, but you know, I have this massive pile of crud on my workbench, so I have one anyway. This isn't the color I would choose. I would go with a copper, but this is kind of a gunmetal gray. So basically you find where the opening is in your jump ring, and you grab both sides of it with a flat nose plier. There we go. So I have flat nose plier on both sides, and I'm going to open up the jump ring by twisting back. So I'm twisting it open. Okay, I'm going to show you. When you have a jump ring and it's kind of circular, you don't want to open it by making the circle bigger. That weakens the jump ring. You want to twist. So I'm using the flush cutters the flat nose pliers to twist it open. Okay. So now I'm just going to hang on to one side of it with the flat nose plier. I'm going to drop on the ear wire, and then if I can find the component, I'm going to drop that on there. It's nice to use jump rings because jump rings don't put any pressure on the enameled glass. Okay, so there's the finished earring. Now, to be honest, I'd be a lot happier if that jump ring was copper, but I don't feel like stopping this to find a copper one. So here, I hope that you can see that well. Now you just have to do that a second time and you've got a pair of earrings. Okay, that's it. Bye-bye.